So far in this series of videos on the circulatory system, we've considered the heart, both the adult heart and the fetal heart, and the heartbeat, and how the heartbeat is adjusted for changing body needs and that sort of thing. In this video, I'd like to take the topic away from the heart and deal with the blood vessels themselves, more significantly in the systemic circuit than in the pulmonary circuit, although we will mention the pulmonary circuit as well. In the systemic circuit, remember that we start at the left ventricle and we have arteries. Arteries go to capillary beds, and the capillaries go to veins, and the veins take blood back to the right atrium. That's the systemic circuit. Blood is always contained inside a structure, like these ones: left atrium, pulmonary artery, inferior vena cava, and brachial vein. One of the things that is a challenge for many people to do is try to visualize the route that blood takes as it goes around the body. This is a very useful exercise that you can actually do. If you consider these four structures through which blood travels, which is the correct order that blood goes through them? If you start with the left atrium, which order does blood visit on its way around the body back to left atrium here, back to the heart, which would be in the right atrium? Left atrium into left ventricle, obviously, and around. We'll go through that in a couple of minutes, but you might think about that, see if you can sort of place it in sequence. To start this video and the topic of blood vessels around the body, I want you to recognize that capillaries exist in all of these places. There's a lot more. That's just the ones that I selected to talk about in this video. When blood leaves the left ventricle, it's actually leaving the heart in the aorta. So I'd like to represent the aorta here as a major blood vessel. So blood leaving the left ventricle, going down the aorta. And from the aorta then, there's branches that go to the various parts of the body. What you are charged with knowing really is, I have to leave that one out for obvious reasons, is you're charged with knowing the names of a good number of these. So I'm just going to put that like that. So when we're considering blood in the aorta, oxygenated blood, leaving the left ventricle, the blood comes down the aorta and some of it goes up to the head. Some of it goes to the shoulder, some of it goes to the heart, and on to some goes to the liver, and so on. The blood that goes to the head is the blood that goes out the carotid arteries. So I'm going to put carotids here. So it goes out the carotid artery to the head. The blood that goes to the shoulders goes out the subclavian. I'm not going to write artery every time. That should be fairly obvious. The blood that goes to the heart goes out the coronary. If I were to have put these in sequence, the very first blood vessels to branch off of the aorta actually go to the heart, because the aorta is at the heart, so the coronary arteries are tiny little branches that leave the aorta at the heart and feed the heart muscle. If you look at pictures of the heart, you'll see there's blood vessels over the surface of the heart, and that's the coronary arteries and coronary veins, but we haven't mentioned veins yet. The liver, hepatic is the word that refers to liver. Intestines, mesenteric. Kidneys is renal. you'll recognize a lot of these terms. Iliac, arteries that go to the legs. From these body parts where the capillary beds are, the blood has to go back through veins to the right atrium. From the head, the blood goes down the jugular veins. I put arms here because I want to mention specifically that one of the branches of the subclavian takes blood into the arms. This is the brachial artery. It might not show up. The brachial artery goes to the arms, and from the arms goes through the brachial vein back into the subclavian. So we can just put subclavian here. The heart, we have a coronary vein. And obviously, again, coronary vein is one of the veins that's on the surface of the heart, so it goes almost right into the right atrium. There's hardly any distance between it at all. The liver, we have a hepatic vein. Intestines, obviously mesenteric vein. Kidneys, the renal vein. The iliacs to the legs, some of you no doubt have heard of a femoral artery. The femoral artery is a branch of the iliacs that feeds the large quadricep muscle of the femoral artery. But regardless, the blood going from the legs back into the vena cava is the iliac vein. There is a femoral vein, but there's an iliac vein. So all of these conduct blood back to the right atrium through the vena cava. If you recall, there's two vena cavas. There's an anterior vena cava and a posterior vena cava. These ones here actually go through the anterior vena cava. These ones don't go through the vena cava. Well, they do, but it's right on the surface of the heart. These ones are the posterior vena cava. One more thing that has to be mentioned in here, and it has to do with the digestive system function. There's another blood vessel that's really, really important, and it actually takes blood from the intestines to the liver. And by rights, I suppose I should be coloring it purple, because it's not really totally oxygenated anymore, because it's gone through the capillary bed in the intestines, but it's also picked up the nutrients in the intestines. And one of the things you'll recall is that the sugars get stored in the liver in the form of glycogen. This blood vessel here is called the hepatic portal vein. Portal veins are unique in the body. There's only two of them that I'm aware of. Portal vein is unique because it has a capillary bed where it starts, and it has a capillary bed on the other end. So what it does really is it picks up nutrients and delivers at least the glucose portions of the nutrients to the liver before it'll take the rest of the nutrients back to the hepatic vein. So that's a sort of a roadmap around the body. Most of this video is going to look at the differences between arteries, capillaries, and veins in terms of their structures and their locations and their functions. But before we get into that, it's worth having a look at this topic. I'm going to return to those four blood vessels, or not all blood vessels, this is a chamber here. Can we put them in the correct order? If we're considering the left atrium, what's the correct order that they're in? Blood leaving the left atrium, goes to the left ventricle now. We're going to put, here's our brachial here, and the vena cava, so it would make sense to me to move this one out for now. Put this one here. See if that makes some sense. The blood's in the heart, the left atrium, it goes to the left ventricle, gets pumped out the aorta, it goes out the aorta, into the subclavian, into the brachial, subclavian vein again, but up the vena cava. So there we have the inferior vena cava. It can get back to the heart without going through the pulmonary artery. The reason being is this isn't part of the same circuit. This is part of the pulmonary circuit. I haven't got that on here yet. The aorta doesn't take blood to the lungs. The pulmonary artery takes blood to the lungs. So this would be a misnomer in here. We do have a pulmonary artery here. And we have a pulmonary vein. But it doesn't take blood, it doesn't come out of the aorta. I should have color-coded this differently. Because it's the pulmonary artery that has deoxygenated blood. The pulmonary vein has the oxygenated blood, and it takes the blood back to the heart. So to put this one in sequence, we would have to suggest that left atrium, brachial vein, inferior vena cava, it goes into the right atrium, into the right ventricle, gets pumped out the pulmonary artery to the lungs, back from the lungs and the pulmonary vein, goes into the left atrium, so this would be a correct sequence here. This little challenge gets immediately more difficult if you were to replace one of these, and let's pick this one, with an organ. The kidneys. So instead of dealing with the blood vessel, you have to reorient yourself and go down here, kidneys, and the pattern follows. But it gets a little bit more challenging when you do it that way. I hope you enjoyed this look at blood vessels and the pathway around the body. The next video looks at blood vessels in terms of their structure, their function, and their location. Thanks again.